Welcome back to Behind the Play. My name is Alex Adams, and today I'm joined by Michael Grange, one of the best basketball writers in Canada, covering the Raptors and a bit of Canada basketball for Sportsnet for a long, long time. I know, Michael, you said that this is your 25th year. How does it feel to be older than, covering the Raptors for longer than a lot of guys are in the NBA?
Yeah, I guess I don't feel it, but sometimes I do.
That's
But I
good.
mean,
That's good.
it's amazing how things have changed. It's amazing how the industry has changed, how the league has changed. Um, Still love basketball though, so that keeps you going. And Sportsnet's always been very good to me. So you kind of keep grinding, and never know where it's going to take you.
A lot of times on this podcast we ask journalists about their career, and you've had a quite an interesting career. Obviously, just detail a little bit about your career journey. I know you went to Mount Allison, you went to Western for journalism school. Just kind of talk about how you came to where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm kind of in this weird space where I kind of got into the industry when it was still at least reminiscent of what it had been maybe even 30, 40, 50 years before. And then I'm in the industry now when it's almost unrecognizable
Yeah.
in some ways to what it was when I started. So um, was always a guy who just loved reading, loved writing from a young age. I was really lucky. You know, um, my mom and my dad too kind of encouraged that, and I just was one of those guys that loved reading the newspaper back to cover to cover, loved the sports section maybe the most. Um, and that never really stopped. And at university in New Brunswick, um, one of the funnest things to do was to go to the library and get the Toronto papers, but they're usually about 3 days old. Which is unfathomable, right? But like, I
Yeah.
mean, there was no internet, and the papers literally had to be shipped there. And so I'd go and read the Globe Mail, read Stephen Brunt,
Mm.
and some of the other guys I ended up working with, and it didn't matter that it was, a Saturday paper. I was reading it on Tuesday. It still felt, and so that's kind of the thing. But when I finished and I worked in the student newspaper at Mount A, it was so small you could kind of
You
do
did,
anything. You could play
didn't
basketball. Pardon me?
I heard that you would cover your own games that you'd play from out of
Yes,
notes, and just so people don't know that you played on the basketball team and then you'd write about the game. How
exactly. Yeah,
critical were
yeah.
you of
Yeah, the Argosy, I think it only came out once a week. Yeah, it only came out once a week. So you'd play a couple of games on the weekend, and then I'm gonna say I can't remember exactly. Maybe the paper would come out on the Friday. And so, yeah, I would write game summaries about the basketball game. And yeah,
how
so
how how, how self-critical were you of yourself compared to the rest?
um, I wasn't very self-critical. I would say I was insecure enough that I wasn't going to go eviscerate myself in print, although I probably deserved it at times. I would counter that by I wasn't all that self-complimentary, so I didn't take
Okay,
advantage of the position, I guess is what I would say.
fair enough.
Anyway, it was kind of low-key stuff. It was fun. Um, but then when I finished university, like the idea of being a journalist, it just seemed completely far-fetched. Like
Mm.
I just had no connection to the business. I had no insight into the business. No, it would have been like, okay, I'm going to be an astronaut kind of thing. And so came back to Toronto and worked as a bartender for a year and a bit, and then got a job working for the city of Toronto, Metro Toronto then, and I was a welfare caseworker.
Yeah.
Did that for about 4 years, just because the economy was pretty tough then. It was a bad recession, and they were hiring, kind of, and I was able to. I had a friend who's had some family working, and just kind of suggested I should apply. They were hiring. I got hired. It was a good job at the time, very interesting, saw and experienced a lot of things I otherwise never would have.
Mm.
Uh, and it was a good experience. but as I was doing that, I got even more passionate about reading and writing, um and I decided I wasn't going to do this for my whole career or my whole life. So I was considering other options. I applied to teachers college a few times. I was very close to going to law school, but really what I wanted to do was be a journalist. I don't know why exactly.
Mm.
And took a course at Ryerson University at night, in magazine writing. That was kind of
Yeah.
the form I loved the most. And kind of got some good feedback, like it was positive in terms
Mm.
of what I was doing. Um, and I just said, look, I'm going to apply to journalism school. And Western at the time had a master's in journalism. It was a 1-year program, just 12 months. Carleton, I think, was 2 years. So I was like,
Mhm.
well, I wanted to get it over as quickly as I could. And yeah, so I kind of went for it. I had to learn how to type. I didn't know how to type,
Huh.
and still barely know how to type. And literally, like, there was a typing course that you had to pass as part of the program, and I failed it. Like,
Wow.
and like you know, they
Yeah.
just kind of looked the other way and
Oh, interesting.
mark. But and then from there, happened very quickly. I was incredibly lucky. I meet a lot of young journalists, and what can they learn from my example or story? And I hesitate to tell them probably nothing, because I just had a combination of I was very desperate. Like, I was older than everyone in my class pretty much. And so, and
Mhm.
I quit a good job and, wrote the check myself, and I felt like I had to succeed.
Yeah.
And so, from on that front was, I give myself credit, was a really, really determined student. And but also got some really lucky breaks. Like,
Yeah, you have some. I did some my homework. Talk a little bit about, like, I think the two breaks was one you had a piece in the Globe and Mail, and then you had one which was hockey related in the New York Times. Maybe just talk about those kind of
sure.
lucky breaks, because they're
Yeah, I mean,
interesting.
yeah, so you did a little homework. Good for you. I'm not surprised based on what I know about you. But yeah, so the first one was literally, I think, our first assignment in class. You put your hand in a bowl that had a bunch of names in it, and
Mm.
whatever name you pulled out, that's you had to do. Like, it was kind of like your term assignment. It was an 800-word feature, which is laughable when I think about it. It's like
Wow.
the kind of thing you do in, like, I do it in an afternoon now, right? But the name I pulled out was Martha Henry. I had no idea who Martha Henry was, and turned out, luckily, right, she was a really prominent Shakespearean actor,
Mhm.
and not just Shakespeare, but she was a leading Canadian figure in Canadian drama circles, and at the time was the artistic director of the main theater there in London, Ontario.
Mhm.
And so great, okay, great. So I reach out to her, we set up an interview, and as I'm talking to her, I don't know, I can't remember the context, but it turned out that she had this big falling out with the Stratford Festival, and which again meant almost nothing to me. And but it was a big moment in her. She was going back to perform at Stratford for the first time since this falling out, and it was a big deal. And um and again, to my credit, I somehow recognized that this was, there was a bit of a story here, right? Like, it
Yeah.
wasn't just, and so, so I wrote it up, and painstakingly, because you had all this time to do it. And and I thought it was pretty good. And I did have one friend in journalism, and I had met them through when I was working in welfare
Huh.
and doing some volunteer work, and his wife worked at the Globe, Jennifer Wells. And I think I reached out to her, and she suggested I think what I did is I submitted to the Facts and Arguments. No,
Okay.
no, I can't remember exactly the details. Anyway, I get connected with an editor. I fax it to them. Again, this is 1990s, and sure enough, they want to publish it.
Mhm.
And I'm like over the moon. And this is here I am, first semester of journalism school, first assignment really I do, and it gets
Mhm.
published in the Globe and Mail. The only catch was I had never mentioned this to Martha Henry. and
Yeah.
so and
Yeah.
so, and this was something that, now you understand how publicity teams work, and this was something they would have wanted to kind of
Then
roll out
themselves.
on their terms and everything. And she was so mad. And she kind of lit
What a
into me on the
lesson.
phone. And because it was a rookie mistake for sure by me. And she just lit into me, and I thought my career was over. And anyway, but the bottom line was, I had a clip in the Globe Mail, which is pretty good. And then my next uh probably even more lucky stroke was my girlfriend at the time. Her brother was buddies with Eric Lindros,
Yeah.
and this
Wow.
was during the 1994 lockout. And Lindros had a bunch of buddies who were at Western, and so he'd come up and was living with them, practicing with the hockey team at Western, and just kind of living a student life, like something
Yeah.
he couldn't experience because he'd been playing hockey, basically professionally since he was 15. And so I was, so I reached out to Lindros through this friend of mine. I thought it'd be a good story. Again, it was a school assignment. And I think we went to a bar and shot some pool, and he kind of sussed me out. I guess I passed whatever test he had. And then we met and at the student bar like a couple of days later, and it was a pretty full-on feature-length interview, and he was
Hmm.
great, and he was really nice. And I got to meet his buddies, went and saw where he lived, and I remember he drove me drove me back to my place or whatever in his like a whatever Beamer he was driving at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty nice car. And and it ended up being like a really good story, right? Like it was this guy who was
It was
taking advantage
huge.
of this opportunity to live a life that he had to give up because to pursue his career. And and the timing, it was great. And so he was with the Flyers at the time. And so this is the one where I reached out to my friend Jennifer Wells, and she said, well, you've had one in the Globe, why don't you try the New York Times? And I was like, okay. And and so this is a wild, I still, this is just very much of the time,
Uh-huh.
but it made me laugh. And so I picked up the phone and I called the sports department of the New York Times, and somehow got through to the assistant editor there, Jay Schreiber was his name. And I just kind of pitched it. I said, this is this is where I am, this is what I'm doing. And they said, all right, sure. And so I faxed it to them. And the crazy thing about that one too is I negotiated on the fee.
Really?
They wanted to pay me like, I'm gonna say, like, it's like being like a 1,200 word piece that ran maybe 1,500, I can't remember.
Okay.
And uh and they wanted to pay me like 200 US. And I was like, well, how about this much? And I said, all right, all right. So yeah, that I'm still,
Wow, that's some balls. Yeah, yeah.
I can't believe I did that. But anyway, that ran on the back page of the Sunday sports section in the New York Times.
Wow.
And I still have that one. I still have that one framed. And
That's awesome.
so, long story short, or short story long, when again, and this is where the industry is so different, and I always
Mhm.
feel sheepish when I'm talking to people in your situation. At the time, the major newspapers in the country would have summer internship programs. They were most of the, well, I think all the papers were unionized, so the internship programs were actually, they
Hey.
paid a reasonable
Mhm.
rate. It wasn't just you had to, you know,
Free.
and it was a job. And so I kind of ended up having a pick of those, right? Because here's your clip in the New York Times, here's your clip in the Globe Mail.
Yeah.
I had some
It's
other
pretty
good work, reasonable work. So so I ended up working at the Globe as a summer intern, and that kind of was the start of things, and did well enough that summer. I was in news, and then somebody got pregnant, so I think I got a 1 day a week contract for the
Mhm.
winter. I had
Mhm.
a full-time job that I got, plus I would go in Sundays and work at the Globe and Mail. Then I got another internship the next summer. And it took about 3 years of part-time contracts and internships and
Mm,
before I finally got hired. And I'd done a few rotations through sports, but at the time I thought I was going to be a news reporter,
okay.
was excited about doing that. And but at the first full-time job that became available was in the sports department as an agate editor, basically,
Huh.
which is the kind of lowest
Yeah.
uh, uh, point on the totem pole, even among it, and I shouldn't say even among editing, but within the editing structure, it's
The
the worst
lowest.
job you can ever
Yeah.
imagine for me.
Yeah.
And required, remember, I'm a horrible typist, and it required its own, you had to data entry with its own codes
Okay.
and
Oh,
stuff.
oh,
And so
oh no.
keyboard codes, and it was really kind of intense because each edition of the paper, like if the baseball game went to the 13th inning, you had to get that score in, you had to readjust the standings. I was the worst. I literally once had to leave the desk. I was in tears. I'm
Oh,
like 28 years old, and I'm like wandering around the building and like at midnight because I'm so friggin' bad at this.
yeah.
I'm screwing up all the time. And finally I was so bad that they made me a reporter. That's kind of what happened.
That's normally how it works, eh, Michael?
Yeah,
It's just you're
yeah,
so bad that then you get the job. Yeah.
they just basically had to take me away from what I was, because I was so bad that like literally the agate would come out in some of the editions, things would be crooked, like the stats were wrong, like they'd get
Uh,
complaints, so they
and
go do something, you can't harm anything.
and then you kind of came into covering the Raptors beat, kind of someone it was someone.
Yeah, there's another lucky break. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, Rob McLeod, who I worked with for years at the Globe, he, and again, luck, right? So my first year as a journalist was the year the Raptors started, so
Mm,
95, 96.
yep, that's right.
And so I got a chance to cover the Raptors. I would sort of pitch these ideas, and the Globe was pretty good if you had a feature idea. I think the first one I ever did was I did a feature on Leo Routins, and
Mm,
so like I was kind of around the periphery of it. I did do some rotations through sports, and that so I would get a taste of it here and there. But Rob he was a big bike cyclist, and he got hit by a streetcar.
oh,
And I always have to tell that happy ending. He ended up fine. He's good. He still lives a very happy, active life. But he was badly injured, and he was off work for, I'm going to say, it might have been a year, maybe just less than that. But so somebody had to cover the Raptors. There you go. And it just kind of happened to coincide with the year that the franchise got sold. There was a whole shotgun clause with Bitov and Alan Slate and the new arena going in, and
mm-hmm.
Isaiah Thomas leaving. And it
Yeah.
was, the team was terrible, but the news stories were great. And so that was a really cool experience. And I always did a lot of other stuff when I was at the Globe, like and the Raptors did go through some really
Mm,
fallow periods,
yeah.
but I was lucky to cover, as I said, the demise of the first iteration, and then Vince Carter being drafted, and then of course the rise of Vince. And so that kind of, so I was always attached to them. But I would do a lot of other things too, and a lot of feature writing and sports business writing, and I covered golf a lot,
Mm,
which was fun. And then when I moved to Sportsnet, same thing. I was hired to do a whole bunch of different stuff, and I did. But then, as the Raptors really got good in 13, 14 and on, and then it just kind of ate up everything else. And so so it's become
yeah.
my main thing for about the last 10 years.
What's interesting, like you mentioned multiple times how much you love feature writing. What do you love about that kind of format? And like you had a big read on Darko Rajakovic. Like how does that kind of come about for you, Michael?
Yeah, I guess it's always been the stuff I like to read the most. And so the opportunity to kind of visit with people, get to know them a little bit, get to know the people in their life a little bit, it's always kind of the most rewarding.
Mm.
You get to, I think, every element of writing requires significant craft, and there's that old line, if give me more time, I'll write you a shorter letter, so like,
Yeah.
people overlook that, how right from headline writing, the how difficult and important that is to, all the other writing in between. But I think to have the opportunity, and it's interesting now in the digital age, you don't have to choose if it's going to be 2,000 words or 4,000 words, based on how much room there's physically in the paper. It can be, well, we can go 5,000, right? Because it doesn't have to be. And so it's really fun. Like you get to really make some choice, you get to choose a theme, you get to choose, how, what you think the most interesting point of entry is. You get to add some layers and some nuance in terms of, like things aren't usually black and white. So it's kind of fun and rewarding to be able to kind of, explain things in full, because you have the space to do it. So, and, I think I was always okay at it. But I think I've gotten over time a lot better at it. And, it doesn't fill me with a ton of anxiety. Like I kind of
Okay.
just, I just kind of,
Like have fun with it?
yeah, almost,
Almost.
almost,
Almost. A little bit.
it's still a lot of hard work,
Yeah.
and, you still got to kind of bury yourself for the amount of time. Some of them take months and months or you're kind of pecking at them for weeks or months. And then in the case of the Darko one, like I had some interviews from Summer League, but I really only committed to doing it like maybe 10 days before it ran.
Mm.
And things came together really fast. But whatever period it's kind of like it's constantly in your mind.
Yeah.
You're thinking about it. And I guess, the one thing that, if I've learned is, just I just kind of go about my day, sort of,
Mm.
and then eventually the jigsaw puzzle comes together. And then
Mm.
when something clicks, like I literally, wake up in the middle of the night and I'll write 4 sentences, or, and I just always kind of keep jotting. I keep a list of kind of the main things I want to hit
Yeah.
as I'm transcribing interviews, and yeah, and then when it kind of comes together, it feels great. Like it's a
Yeah.
nice, satisfying feeling of completion. And so often in, any element of this business, you're always kind of making a compromise here or there. So it's nice to be able to go, yep, this is about 95% of what I intended it to be.
Yeah.
And you never get to 100, but if you get into the 90s, you're doing pretty good.
Well, that's awesome to hear. What's interesting when you talk about kind of pecking at people and relationships, like when I saw you, and I'll admit, maybe I was, watching you intensely a little bit at the training camp in Toronto, just how you kind of managed the room and players, and it felt like you knew everyone in the building. Just talk about how you manage relationships with players, coaches, management, but also, write these kinds of stories and be fair and critical when you're reporting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily all that conscious of that, but I understand what you mean. Like I would, at various times in my career, I watch other people do that, and I go, "Damn!" Um, so I guess the first thing is you have the advantage of time and visibility a little bit. Like I'm not saying, all these players know who I am or
Yeah.
what I do, but they've seen me around now for time. And if I don't know the player, I've known their agent. And if I, and um, so that kind of helps. I wouldn't suggest I'm like buddies with all these guys, but
Mm.
you're at least comfortable enough that you can kind of, begin a conversation. And I think an important thing I've learned over time is not every conversation has to be for the purpose of
Yeah.
generating an interview or anything. It's sometimes it's just let them, just let them feel you out, like establish that you're not going to bite, that
Yeah.
that you're somebody that they might actually not mind speaking with.
Yeah.
Because and it's not important, you don't have to be people's friends, but I think you do need to be somebody that they at least don't object to being around.
Yeah.
Like it's a pretty low bar, but but the higher you can get on that, like the more you can kind of,
Mhm.
and so I am lucky, right, covering the Raptors, and I get to travel a little bit with Sportsnet, and so if I go to Utah, and Nikhil has just been traded to Utah, well, I make a point of seeking him out, talking to him, let them know that you're following their game. Like,
Mhm.
that's what's kind of has been interesting over the years
Huh.
is, if you just see somebody and say, hey, man, I saw you play great last week,
It
just as you would like to anyone else, like they're like, thanks, like, oh yeah, and just like kind of, I guess it's in a way it's been a little easier as I've gotten older, because they're now they remind me more of my kids in a way. But you just let them know, like if they're struggling, hey man, keep it up, don't worry, man, I think you're going to do great, and I can
Mhm.
see what I can see it, don't worry, it's coming. Like, it sounds stupid, like, in what place do I have to make
Yeah.
a judgment like that? But it's sincere, I don't
Mhm.
make it up. And they kind of go, okay, like it's
And that's not for a story. It's not like tomorrow
yeah, it's
big
just,
read on Nikhil Alexander Walker.
yeah, it's
It's
just,
just yeah.
and you see Kelly and you're like, you knew he got married. Hey, I said, just
Yeah.
whenever you have an opportunity to just sort of break a little bit of a barrier down, it helps. It takes time. It doesn't happen the first time you're around somebody. Um, and the more you can do it, the better off you are. And then over a while, you have a track record, right? So, you
Mhm.
know, if it's not the player, the agent trusts you. If it's not, that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
that's it. I mean, I wish I could give you a formula or
No,
anything like
no, that's
that.
awesome. Yeah, no, it's
You know, yeah, and a lot of people are a lot better at it than I am, but you just try to be a personable person as much
Mhm.
as you can, and um and I think also you got to know you're in it for the long game. Like you can criticize, you can raise points or issues, but I think it's very important to be balanced as you do it, and recognize that very rarely is going in on somebody, not that it's my style ever really, but
Mhm.
for the sake of it, often it's not even right. Like, like things are so, there's
Oh,
always a longer view to everything. So, if you want to just smash somebody, like, yeah, you might be right for the minute, but like it's not really,
mhm.
not often that it's actually a true representation of the whole context. And two, you're in for the long game,
Yeah.
so, like, again, so you kind of, you got to be honest to your readers and your role. But like, I will learn like little cheap shots, little things to think you're being funny or clever.
It's
A, you're probably not, and B, it's just not worth it
yeah.
most of the
Well, I want to go to the Raptors for a little bit, and I kind of prepared for this interview and saying, "Woe is me, the Raptors! The sky is falling." And then they won last night against the Milwaukee Bucks in convincing fashion. So I guess just for you, Michael, how would you evaluate the first couple games for the Raptors so far this season?
I'm no different than you. Like, I mean, or anyone else, I don't think. Like, I firmly believe the sky was falling after 4 games. I guess what I would say is, in my own defense, is like you could see some really positive qualities. I thought this team showed through those 4 games they could be a really, really good defensive team. I thought there was moments where you could see, okay, I can see what they're trying to get to offensively. But the flip side is they seemed like a very easy team to defend. You just kind of pack the paint and, you didn't have to worry too much. And so, after they got beat by Portland, I was like, this is how things unravel. Is you're asking a group of guys, 3 of your most prominent players are in contract years. You're asking them to sacrifice offensively for the benefit of others. You're asking them to defend at a really high level, even though they're, they're getting the ball run down their throat because they're missing 60% of their shots. And you could just sort of see between that and the schedule, things really, and I think with a new coach and a new staff, like, you need that proof of concept, and you weren't getting it. And so you just kind of look at this road trip and what's going on. They could be 1-8 really fast. Yep. And that's when things get really messy. And, believe me, there was people behind the scenes, even after they were 1-3, that were kind of alarm bells were going off. So that game last night was huge. I think it says a good amount about the Raptors, where they can get to. I think defensively, again, they demonstrated they have a chance to be very special because, Dennis Schroeder at the point of attack, he was give Dame Lillard all the problems he could handle.
OG.
I think you're defending the point of attack better than they have been in the past. And I think a guy like OG and Anunoby matches up, as we know, with so many good different, like everybody. And, so you're halfway there, right? And the flip side of this is, man, I think Milwaukee's got some big issues defensively. And I think a lot of them start with Dame Lillard. And so that's going to be a story to follow. But yeah, a giant win. And it just kind of, they can exhale a little bit. Like, I think you look through the first, I would say 12 games, and if they get through them 4-8, 5-7, they're doing great, because it's a very tough schedule to start. And, you just don't want to and didn't want to see them go through it 2-10 or, something like that. That's hard to bail out of.
Yeah, only the Lakers last year kind of salvaged their, what was it, like 2-13 start or whatever. Yeah. But just with that, because I think most Raptors fans this year, just the player everyone is just so excited about is Scottie Barnes. He's, it's early on, and I don't know if he's going to shoot almost 43% from 3, but just what have you seen in his game to really, it seems as though he's taken that next step that people kind of maybe expected last year from him? How would you maybe what do you see in his game that's been made him so much more effective this year?
Yeah, I think they're using him a little better defensively, a little differently, and I think it suits him. I don't think he's a great on-ball defender. Certainly didn't show it last year. Like, his real magic as a player, and certainly defensively, he's a playmaker, right? Like, he's going to take a gamble, make a play, block a shot, make a steal, whatever it might be. And so I think they're playing him more against bigs and more kind of close to the rim. And so, I think it just plays to his strengths better. And so that's helped. It lets him rebound more so he can get out and run. He's incredible in the open court, better than I've ever seen so far this year. And then offensively, the shooting is a factor, right? Like, I mean, I don't think he's going to shoot 43% from 3, but
he looked good
a couple of months now, right? Like, he was 50% in preseason, and he hasn't really missed, it's been a couple of weeks now in the regular season. So it just shows that there's the potential that he can be an effective 3-point shooter. I think the threes he's taking are, for the most part, really good. Like, a lot of them are just flat out catch and shoot, feet set. And then he just punishes. If you're smaller, he's killing you. And he is, he is incredibly strong. I think like you can see it in his frame. You can see how he's added muscle to his frame, but he also has one of those builds where like it's like you'd almost call it like farmer strong. Like
Yeah, yeah,
you like I don't know if you've been around it very much, but like his wrists are really wide, his forearms are big. Like
yeah.
he's not gym strong, like he is born strong. And so so he can put his shoulder in the Giannis and make Giannis move, and stuff like that. So I think, and he's a great passer. So I think he grew up a lot in the past year. I don't think I think last year was probably in the end underplayed how he had that ankle injury going into training camp. I think that set him back, got off on the wrong foot in the regular season, and that just it just kind of played into a tough narrative in a way. I don't think he handled it all that great, and I think the whole environment around the team wasn't all that great.
Yep.
So all that stuff's in kind of in the rear view mostly, and he's healthy, and he looks like he can. The ceiling they need him to have is really high, but you can kind of go, well,
You see it.
yeah, like there's some potential here, and he's got some Draymond Green in him, but he's a way better shooter, way better offensive, way better scorer than Draymond Green. He's got some Giannis in him. Obviously not quite the physical powerhouse that Giannis is, but probably has a little bit more feel, a little bit more natural playmaking ability. Like Lamar Odom as a guy, you go
Yeah.
back a little bit, but he's way more physical and than Lamar Odom was. So, he is a little bit unique as a player, and sometimes guys like that, it takes a long time to figure out all the different ways they can impact a game because there's so many different ways.
Yeah, and with that, obviously the questions for this team kind of in the future, in the media future, you could lump Gary Trent into this, but more so just Siakam and OG. They're probably going to be free agents in the case of OG. Just what happens there, do you think, kind of in the future? Obviously, there seemed to be a rupture between Siakam and the Raptors this offseason. You've written a little bit about that, but just what do you think happens there? Is it as simple as if the Raptors play well, they get extended? If the Raptors fall apart, they don't? Like, where do you see this kind of?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they suck, like you're not going to pay a ton of money to bring a bunch of
Yeah,
guys back.
that's true.
But like so if they're in the trade deadline, they're a lottery team, then
Mm-hmm.
at some point you just have to acknowledge that this isn't working. You've had two different coaching staffs, two playing styles, and minimal success. So um, you got to take advantage, and there would be criticism at that point, I think, of management for not recognizing and have you maximized the return you could get from some of these assets. um the flip side is if this team ends up being what I think they believe they can be, which is pushing for a playoff spot of kind of 45, 46 wins in a tough Eastern Conference, and it's interesting, like it's hard to imagine both OG and Siakam coming back. Like they're both
Just
giant
money wise.
contracts. All of a sudden you're in luxury tax territory. Certainly would be when you've signed Scottie for a team that's kind of, a second round team at very best, sort of. Um, so that's where the decisions get very difficult. Maybe there's a scenario where, Siakam's willing to take less than the max but I don't know. I'd be shocked by that. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine that next summer the team wouldn't look different going into next year, and how you manage all of that. I mean, it's a tricky line they're trying to walk, um, which again, going back to our earlier point, makes how this season progresses in the early stages really matter, because if there's clarity on one side or the other, then it could mean very different things for the roster, I would say.
When does the kind of the buck stop with management in terms of just their decisions? And like, they won a championship. They, you can't take that away from them. They had amazing years before that. It wasn't just they signed one player, got Giannis and then won. Like, they built a great program, but seems to be a bit more complicated, let's say, since. When does it kind of ownership and maybe Masai, like when do they become on the hot seat? Maybe not hot seat, but just kind of they get more scrutinized and more pressure on them.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're approaching that. And, the run from 13, 14 through even the year in the bubble when they drafted
Yeah.
Scottie, like it's hard to find any flaws, right? Like, I mean, and their run from 15 when they drafted Norm, I believe 2015, got him in the second round, to via that trade with Milwaukee, to drafting OG, I think in 2018,
17. Yeah.
17 somewhere. That, that's as good a run of talent acquisition that any team, I'm not going to say ever, but it's hard to do better given that you had one lottery pick, 9, and you nailed it with Pirtle. And then, as people know, Norm's a second round pick, Fred's undrafted, Siakam's a late first, OG's a late first, DeLon Wright's a late first. That's 5 players, and you've got an NBA starter in Pirtle, like a decade-long NBA starter in Pirtle, an All-NBA defender in Anunoby, an All-Star in Van Vliet, an All-NBA player in Siakam, and probably a 12, 13-year rotation guy in DeLon Wright. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And the problem is they've never come close to replicating that. And so I think, the Barnes pick looks like a really good pick, obviously. But, and I think there is a difference when you're picking 29th instead of 22nd. And you've had to send out some draft equity to facilitate some trades and stuff like that. But, they just haven't nailed that next player. And I think that's the problem, is from OG on, apart from Siakam, from Barnes, they haven't added one player that looks like they can contribute to a winning NBA team. And that's really what's the difference, and how much of, so I think, and I think, to me, a big mistake they made was the Thad Young deal, and I understand why they made it, but I think they kind of overestimated where that team was and readiness to win, and trading down in that draft proved to be a mistake, right? And like, it's unfortunate with Christian Koloko and his health issue, but there was a big difference between drafting I think it would have been 2021, something like that.
I think it was, Walker Kessler was,
I mean, Walker Kessler is the one that I've written about that, but who knows if that's the guy you would have taken. But there were other good players. But if you were looking for a defensive minded big, Walker Kessler looks like he's going to be a pretty good one.
Yep.
And so those are, that's a mistake, that's an error. And they've got it, like the Otto Porter signing. You saw last night, like, that guy's a pretty good player. You understand why they went and did it, and the health issues are another thing. So anyway, they're accountable for everything, and I would say their last 3-4 years have not been anywhere near the run they were on the last 7 or 8 before. And and I think the belief that they're, the approach they've taken, which is kind of status quo, better to keep talent and kind of wait for a home run. It's so far hasn't proven to be very effective. And, and then I think the real issue will be, is if they do need to pivot out of, a Siakam or an OG, or, then, and you've diminished the potential return on those because of, these guys are pending free agents, etc., maybe coming off not great years. That's, you made a choice and it didn't work out, and you don't get fired for that because of a long track record before it, but they would deserve to be criticized 100%.
Well, at least Gradey Dick is the next Klay Thompson, so all is well.
Hey, I think he's going to be a player, man.
Yeah.
He's the things you can see it a little bit in games, but we get to see it a little bit more and when he's doing workouts and stuff. He is way more athletic than you would maybe guess. He's a really high IQ kid,
Yeah.
as a player, as a person, and seems to be a very hard worker. And that's one thing I can say with a good amount of confidence is if you're talent plus character plus IQ, like it's almost impossible to fail.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you don't, but those guys generally they reach their ceiling, and his ceiling's a little higher than maybe most would have thought.
Yeah, no, for sure. I've kept you long enough, but I want to ask you one Canada basketball question, just because I'm here with you. And when we last spoke, I was in Jakarta, and Canada had not made the Olympics, and now they have. Obviously, beat the United States to win the bronze, thanks to Dylan Brooks and Shea breaking ankles and having a 40 piece, or close to. But just what do you think it means for basketball in this country, for the men's program? Obviously the women have been so successful, but to make the Olympics, and just now that we could maybe see Canada versus the USA at the Olympics or in the finals or winning medals, it'll be really tough. I don't mean it that it's a walk in the park, but what do you think that this, their run and making the Olympics means for basketball in this country?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like kind of less than you might think. Like I in a way, I think basketball is so established. The culture is so, I think that Raptors championship and just the whole environment around the sport has, it's there. It's ubiquitous. It's, it's like, I don't know if them making the Olympics or not making the Olympics could add that much more to what's already in place. I think what it might do, especially if they make a run, is just kind of the very casual fan just loves an Olympics, right? So just like women's soccer, winning gold, and like there were a lot of people who knew nothing about soccer that were pretty inspired by that. So and I think what it would do specifically is more important for Canada basketball is that it has, and making the Olympics was so huge, having a successful World Cup was so huge, is it just kind of bolsters the organization, and I think allows them to continue to add resources and continue distributing resources at the development levels to kind of really help age group teams, age group development. I think that's maybe the big thing. And yeah, just maybe show the basketball can be a unifier in a way that maybe, it was kind of when I was growing up, it was always kind of niche. I think those days are gone, but I just think at this point, I just think I'd be very happy for the individuals involved who've put so much into it and taken a lot of risks and all these other kinds of things to have that they have had the success of getting there. And look, Canada can win gold, right? Like I don't know if they're a favorite, but if they add a piece or two and we know who they are, it's a huge team. They've got great finishers, multiple scorers, really good defensive group, and in a one game showdown they could beat anybody. And so I guess if it were to happen, if you're in a gold medal final against France or the US, wherever it might be, and it would be the final, it would be kind of the bookend to the Raptors title, right? Like it's just the final stamp, not that you need it, of basketball as part of the Canadian sports language. And I don't, as I said, I think it is anyway, but it would be the definitive moment.
Well, Michael, I couldn't have said it better than that, as someone that covered the team. So hopefully they do well.
Great job, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope that you get the chance to go to Paris, or it's actually Lille too as well.
Lille, yes. No, it's in the works. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. I'm doing the same thing, so we'll see if I can get out there and maybe have a pint in Paris. That'd be kind of nice. But Michael, I really appreciate you taking the time and doing this. As you know, a huge fan of yours. Is there anything you just want to plug before I send you off?
No, no, just just thanks for having me on, and good luck with your career. I know you're definitely or got a lot of hustle in you, and that's a huge part of it. So good luck with it. I know it's a tough business, but it's a good one. It's a fun one, and somebody's got to make it. So
Yeah.
good luck to you.
Thank you very much, Michael. It means a lot coming from you, and I'm just gonna hope someone somewhere falls off their bike, and then that's my foot in the door. I'm obviously kidding, but thank you so much, Michael, for taking the time, and hopefully the Raptors, aren't two and whatever after 10 or 12 games, and win a little bit, so it's a bit more exciting for you. So thanks again, Michael.
All right, thanks, Alex.